You put it down? Oh, it's going to be like that kind of day. My name is Ronald White. I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank my beautiful hosts. No, I'm going to get to them. Juanita called me a few months ago. You can see she's a shrinking violet. So you can imagine what our conversation on the phone sounded like. I was so moved by the conversations that we had leading up to this. She made sure that she had me on top of everything as we were approaching, and thank you for that. Thank you. She hooked me up with a beautiful couple that have been transporting us around and hosting us. Paul, Michelle, thank you. Really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. They picked me and my wife and my brother Reggie, who was here. They picked us up from the airport and took us around. And this morning, as this weekend has transpired, I'm a big proponent of online meetings because they really re-energized my sobriety during COVID. And so I have created a whole family online, and they've been coming up to me. I've been seeing that they have actual legs and torsos and all that kind of stuff, you know. And I thank all of you for loving me. I have a sobriety date, July the 14th of 1986. I know, apparently I got sober when I was 6 or something, you know. I have a home group. It's called the Never Too Early Big Book Workshop. We meet online right now. We're about to go hybrid, but we meet online now every Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We have approximately 450 intimate friends that take a walk through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous together every Sunday morning. That meeting started in my mother's kitchen in November of 1987, about 13 of us. My brother Ralph, our friend Strange, Reggie, a few other alcoholics sitting around that kitchen table, hungry for the program of recovery that's outlined in our book, Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a sponsor. His name is Jerome Scott. Jerome has sponsored me since I was about 3 or 4 years sober. Jerome has 51 years of sobriety. I sponsor both men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous. I just sponsor alcoholics. Whoever asks me for help, I think it's my responsibility to be there for them. And they honor me with their trust. I believe in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want to thank you for this privilege, this honor of being able to be at the 90th anniversary of Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, wait, so that's about 4 minutes of my hour. So, oh, yes, I did say an hour, y'all. Strap in. All right. I'll make sure I make it interesting so that you don't get bored. All right. Let me give you a couple of more vital statistics of mine. I am 70 years old. I was born in December the 7th, 1954, in the city of Watts. That's a no, it's not suburban. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm about to start lying up here. It's a low-income area of Los Angeles, right? You know, that's putting it mildly. My mother raised me, and I have 5 brothers. Willie is the oldest, then there's Ralph, there's me, Ronald, and there's Reggie, and there's Ricky, and there's Rod. We were honored to have my brother Ralph speak as the Sunday morning speaker last year. So if I look a little bit familiar, they didn't ask the same guy to come back, don't worry. My mother primarily raised me and my brothers by herself because she put my father out of the house when I was about 8 years old for being a drunk. We called them winos back in my day. My daddy liked to drink a fine little vintage called Ripple. I don't know if they had that here in Ohio, but They sure had it in Los Angeles, and my daddy loved it. You know, a twist top. I don't think Ripple ever saw a grape. My daddy loved it. He smelled of it. And my mother didn't have it, you know, because my daddy couldn't bring home a check. He would come home at the end of a weekend, one of those lost weekends, broke, and she'd meet him at the door asking him, "Ralph, what happened to you? We've got all these boys to feed. What happened?" And I remember he would mumble something you couldn't understand, or he might curse my mother out as if she had done something wrong. And when he did this, he made my mother cry. And he made my mama cry. I looked at him with hatred. I hated him for being so weak. I hated him for being such a punk. I hated him for not loving us enough to bring home the money. I hated him for being an alcoholic. And I swore, as I grew up in that little apartment on 108th and Central in the middle of Watts, I swore I would never grow up to be like him. I'd never drink. And I kept that vow for the first 17 years of my life. I drank nothing. But I've always had the ism of alcoholism, the I, self, and me, that self-possession, that self-obsession, that self-centeredness that I've come to know as part and parcel of the illness that I suffer from. I've always felt like I was too short. Now, I know that, you know, I don't know what the right height is, but I knew I wasn't it. You saw I was talking mess about him putting the mic down because that drew attention to my height. I'm 5'4" and a half, and that's right, a half. That's right. Give me all mine, right? You know what I'm saying? 5'4" and a half. I've always been thin. Well, I'm not thin now, unfortunately. I got that middle age, you see, I'm still hanging on, middle age kind of pouch right here, right? But when I was young, I was always real thin. And I was weak. I couldn't hit a baseball very far. I couldn't shoot hoops. I couldn't play football. And in my neighborhood, all the boys judged each other's self-worth by how athletically inclined they were, how well you played sports. And I wasn't good at it. I always played right field or second base. All the guys in the room understand that's where you put the weak link. That's where you put the guy that can't hit very well. Before I forget it, because I had a resentment against Derek because he's so tall, but I want to thank all the speakers that came before me. Stacy, kicking it off for us. Thank you. Megan, the bank robber. Looking so dangerous. Megan, right? You know. And then Derek. I am so glad. And my girl this morning. Thank you so much. Thank you. You know, whenever I hear the traditions, I know who's going to be speaking because you've done it so well. Thank you. I'm sorry I missed the long timers and my friends, my dear friends, Chip and his wife, because I know they threw it down, except I had to go back to my room and get pretty for you guys. So, you know, I had to miss a little bit of it. But I know I am so grateful that Alcoholics Anonymous has never been about, can you top this? It's never been about, can you top this? Because I'll sit in the chairs and then I want to say, maybe I need to throw a couple of homicides in my pitch, right? You know, a couple of, we the only person that think the worse off you are, the better you look, right? That's Alcoholics Anonymous, boy. And so I will share with you my story because I think that there's some things in it to identify with. Particularly the way that I thought and the way that I felt. As I grow up feeling apart from rather than a part of. My brother Ralph talks about oftentimes he hears me speak or hear Reggie speak, and he thinks we grew up in a whole different household because he doesn't remember it like that. And I know I've taken to saying everything that I share with you this afternoon is based on a true story. Somebody's going to get that, right? You know, because I'm 70. And if I had known I was going to be sharing about the things that happened when I was 10, I would have written it down. But I didn't. So what I'm sharing with you is what I remember to the best of my recollection. And if some of it might seem fantastical or whatever, it's my story and I'm sticking to it. So I come through school. Me and Reggie and Ralph are kind of stair-step. Ralph is 1 year above me, and Reggie is 1 year, about a year and a half below me. So we've always been in classrooms one after the other. I've always gone into a classroom, and my brother Ralph is pretty smart. In fact, he's brilliant. In every classroom I go in, the teacher always says, "Oh, are you Ralph White's brother?" I came here a couple of days ago and somebody asked me that question. "Are you Ralph White's brother?" Now, while I have, and somebody might be able to identify with this, while I have a certain amount of pride in having a brother who is gifted, at the same time, I resent him. Because every time I would come in a classroom after him, and I think I'm kind of smart too, even when I would get A's, I would think, is this his residue? Am I getting these grades because of him? Because of his reputation? And everything that I've ever gotten in life, you guys, I've questioned. I will give you some examples. I came up with a mother who, I told you the way she felt about my father, so there was no alcohol in my household as I grew up. She had us in church every Sunday. My mother's Baptist. We were Southern Baptist, so we were in Tabernacle of Faith Missionary Baptist Church or Weller Street Baptist Church. They always called us. We would always have our little suits on and stuff. We knew every scripture. We knew everything. And they were always, "Oh, there go the little white boys." That's our last name. And imagine being in Watts, being called the little white boys. And so we've always been very disciplined. We were always very religious. Mama believed in religion and books. And so we read voraciously. I read addictively. We always checked out the maximum number of books from the library, and we would read one another's books and stuff. And there's some side effects from reading a lot. I had a great vocabulary. I could write well. I had a vivid imagination, and so I could write essays very well. So I was a great student. In the early 60s, my mother purchased a small little black and white TV, and I fell in love with TV. They used to call me the human TV guide. I knew every show that was on every station, any time of the day. They would play games. I'd be glued to the television, and the neighbors would come by, and they would say, Ralph would say, "Hey, man, watch this. Ronnie, Wednesday, 8 o'clock. I said, 8 o'clock? Oh, Channel 2 is Gunsmoke. Channel 4 is Mannix. Channel 5 is Petticoat Junction. Now, some of our younger members may be puzzled by those shows, but somebody in here know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. Somebody in here know what I'm talking about, because those were the shows I was raised on. And there was one show that I gravitated to that later became one of the guiding forces in my life. This show was called Perry Mason. Now, some of you guys may remember Perry Mason, a show about a criminal defense attorney played by an actor named Raymond Burr. And Raymond Burr was one of the handsomest white boys I'd ever seen on television, right? Tall, broad-shouldered, jet black hair, slick. This was before he was Ironside and all that. He had a kind of, and I'm talking about he would walk around the courtroom with a command and a presence about him. And he would always have the last witness on the witness stand. And Perry's client was in trouble, was about to go down. And his private eye, Paul Drake, would run in the back door with a little note he'd hand to Perry, right? Perry would read the note, and he'd look at that witness, and the witness would get nervous. They would start to sweat and fidget around. And Perry would just say, "Isn't it true? Yes, it is!" Right? Or somebody in the back of the courtroom would jump up, "I did it!" I said, "What?" I used to take a poll when I was in meetings. I was going to ask, where are my criminals at? But I don't need to take that poll, right? Y'all been in courtrooms before. You know it don't go like that. But I thought that's the way it really worked. And I wanted to be Perry Mason because Perry had power. He had power to bend people's will to his simply by the force of his presence and his words. And I thought, maybe I could do that. Perry wasn't an athlete. He wasn't like one of those superheroes I used to obsess on in those comic books I used to ingest. He wasn't wearing a cape or flying. He was a real man. I could see him. Maybe I could do that. So I grew up wanting to be Perry Mason. I wanted to be a lawyer. As I come through school, I'm on the honor roll at every school that I've ever gone to. I told you the way I felt about that. I even questioned that because of my brother Ralph. So even when I have a blessing, I question it. I started playing an instrument, a musical instrument, when I was in junior high school, a trombone. And I got kind of good at it. And when I go to high school, I'm in high school at a music program that's one of the top music programs in Los Angeles, even though it was in the hood. The Lock High Marching Saints. We were a marching band that marched in the Rose Parade in Pasadena on New Year's Day. We raised funds. We went to the Aloha Parade in Hawaii. We had a few of us formed an ensemble, a jazz ensemble, where we went to the Hollywood Bowl. We won sweepstakes as the top high school jazz band in the nation. You would have thought that I would have been on top of the world, right? You would have thought that I would have been, but instead, I'm on an airplane to Hawaii, mad at Evelyn Harvey. Now, Evelyn Harvey later became one of us. I think Evelyn probably has about 45 years now. Evelyn didn't know that she was my girlfriend. I should have told her. But I'm sitting on the plane with Evelyn knowing she's going to talk to me, but instead I'm on the aisle. She's talking to the guy at the window seat for the whole flight. And instead of me enjoying this blessing, I'm thinking about the things I don't have. It's the story of my life. I used to say that I really don't. I wish I could talk to girls. I wish I could dance. I could do that. One of my sponsees, Inette, she tells me that I should always share at a meeting that in 1971 I started dancing on this syndicated dance show called Soul Train. Now, see, I used to not share that. It seems to get the biggest thing in the meeting. That's the fact that I danced on Soul Train, right? I went there. They have this little clip. I had my prom date, this lady named Patrice Rushen. Later became a musical artist. Wow. Had some hits. Forget-me-nots, right? All that, right? And I dated her, but I used to always say girls would never talk to me. Because, you see, I have selective memory. Because I only remember the things that I don't have. I never remember the things that I do have. I always wanted to be like those guys that scored touchdowns. Those guys who were being written up in the newspapers, who had cheerleaders cheering for them with pom-poms. Nobody ever came in science class. Yes, Ronald, that's the right answer. Right? Ego. I was written up in the newspapers when I was young for my academic achievements. I was in the papers for being a fire squad captain. I was this, that, all these things. But I said to myself, nobody ever reads that part of the newspaper. They read the sports page. Everything that I've ever wanted, I've always had. Anybody else? When I look back on my life, anything I've ever wanted, I've always had, but never knew it. Because I am full of resentment before I start drinking. I graduated from Locke High School in 1972, getting ready to go to college. The college I was accepted to was called Loyola University. It's now called Loyola Marymount University. It's a private Catholic school located in a suburban part of Los Angeles called Westchester, run by these Jesuit priests. Now, I don't know anything about Catholicism. I told you I'm Southern Baptist, but they've accepted me in their school on a full scholarship because of my grades. Now, even when I'm going to this prestigious school, I'm resentful because I wanted to go to UCLA because that's where Ralph was. And even though I resent Ralph, I love Ralph, and I'm following him everywhere. Imagine that, right? And so I want to go to UCLA, and they reject me. So he told me, oh, you should apply to Loyola and go there. I do it with grudgingly. And they later tell me, UCLA tells me, oh, we received the wrong person's transcripts. We really wanted to accept you. And I thought that was another curse God had given me. Mind you, Loyola was one of the finest colleges in Los Angeles. God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. I need to let you know this, however. The summer before I started Loyola, when I tell this story, it's funny. I've been telling this story. I'm 38 years sober. And this is a seminal moment in my life because it became my first drink. About a year ago, I told this story, and somebody texted me afterwards that it was a triggering story, and I shouldn't tell this in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Nobody had ever said this to me, and it's been in my story every year that I've shared. So I will apologize ahead of time. I will provide anybody with writing material. My name is RONALD. All right, if you have a resentment against me after I share this, because I have to share it because it's my story. I'm walking along the beach at our graduation party. This is a night beach party. And they had set these trash cans on fire to light up the beach to make it look romantic. And the lights are flickering, and I'm walking with a can of soda. The professor, that's what they call me. And I stopped because I saw a guy and a girl underneath a blanket. And the blanket was moving. And I listened, and I heard the girl say, ooh. I'm sorry, I got lost. Where was I? And I said to myself, I need to get underneath a blanket. But everybody knows I'm the professor, and the professor doesn't get underneath blankets. And somebody was passing around something. I wish I remember what it was because it became my first drink. It was either some Tyrolia or some Spinata. High class stuff, right? Cheap wine, just like my daddy used to drink. Because you see, by now, my thinking told me I could take a drink and I'll never become my father. I thought my father was a high school dropout. I'm going to college on a full scholarship. I'm obviously smarter than him. My daddy was a custodian, a janitor. Nothing wrong with that. But my head told me I'm going to be the next Perry Mason. I'm obviously better than him. So my ego told me I could take a drink and I'll never become my father. And so I drank. I don't think I ever got underneath a blanket that night, but I need to let you know what alcohol did for me and what it began to do for me every time I drank it for the next few years. Alcohol made me feel taller. Alcohol made me feel bigger. Alcohol made my skin feel lighter. Alcohol made me feel cool. My hand went in my pocket, and I kind of got this lean, and it worked. Alcohol freed me. Alcohol freed me from the prison of my thinking. Now, those are words you guys gave me. I didn't think I didn't think of it like that. All I knew is I felt comfortable in my skin. That I felt like I could say the things that have been in my head all this time and not be afraid. That now I could talk to girls and seemingly without me being afraid of what the consequences might be. And it seemed to work for me. I'm a black boy in a college town, and I'm going to the beer bus and the panty raids, and we go into all the frat stuff, and we are doing everything that is out there, and I think I have arrived. I so identify with Bill Wilson and Bill's story. I'm involved in the Black Students Freedom Alliance. You know, I'm doing everything that you might want to see somebody doing on a college campus. I am not only smart, but now I am socially accepted. And that was so important for me. However, alcohol started doing some things to me. I started off drinking. In our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, they describe 3 different types of drinker. They describe the moderate drinker, the person who can take it or leave it. They describe the certain type of hard drinker, the person who might take a shave a few years off their life, but if given a sufficient reason, they will be able to stop or, get this, moderate, slow down. And then they say, but what about the real alcoholic? And then they start having some descriptors of that person. In my junior year in college, I respect the traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, so I don't dwell on the other substances that I use. I like to call them alcohol's cousins, you know. I don't go ahead and dwell on that, but you need to know that I'm a garbage can, that when I got in college, man, not only did I drink, I tried to elongate my drinking. I tried to make sure it lasted. And that starts to do some things to you. Now I don't want to just feel good on the weekends drinking. Now I want to feel good on Monday too. And I want to feel good on Thursday. Now I'm drinking every day of the week. Daily drinking starts to we used to call that drinking on school nights. And now that I'm drinking on school nights, I can't study quite as much. As a consequence of my not studying so much, my grades start to slip. But I can't have that because I told you guys I want to be Perry Mason. So you would think I would stop this foolishness. I would stop drinking during the week. I would ramp up my studies. But instead of me changing my drinking, I changed my life. What do I mean by that? I start becoming a liar and a cheat. I start cheating on my exams. I start plagiarizing my term papers. Hell, I start buying my term papers from these services that used to sell them ready-made. This may not be a big deal to some of you guys, but you need to know, man, that the one thing that I had that I was blessed with was this intelligence that I got through study, through reading, and now I'm starting to cheat on that. I used to look down on people who cheated. People who wanted to look at my paper. People who wanted to do whatever. Because I thought that's the one thing that you don't do. Now I'm the one doing it. And check this. Not only did I start cheating, I started getting comfortable cheating. At first I felt a little guilty about it. But now I started embracing it. In fact, I started taking a little pride in how well I did it. Anybody else? Right? I started not only that I was wondering who was going to tell on themselves. I see you guys. I started taking pride in the way that I cheated because I continued to get good grades and I thought it worked. And so I graduate from Loyola in 4 years and I get accepted to go to law school pursuing Perry Mason. I go to a law school in the city of San Francisco called Hastings College of the Law. One of the most prestigious law schools in the nation. That's not why I went there. I was doing what I've come to know as a geographic. I got accepted to law school in Los Angeles at Loyola Law School. And I started to suspect that if I stayed in Los Angeles, my long-throated brothers, who I was partying with, would drag me down and I would never make it through law school. So I'll just escape from them. I'll go to law school. I'll become Perry Mason. Unfortunately, I took one brother to law school with me that I shouldn't have. Me. Because my disease blossomed when I went to law school. I went to summer school after first and second year, and I graduated from law school early in 2.5 years at the age of 23. I become a law clerk for a criminal defense attorney who drank and used just like me And he said in his firm, they had a motto. He became my first sponsor. He said, Ronnie, in this firm, we work hard and we play hard. And I said, that's just what I want. And he taught me how to work hard during the day and how to party hard all night. And that's the way I made it through law school. I graduate before any of my classmates. They're finishing the last semester while I'm out of school, just before my 24th birthday. They have a test you got to take to become a lawyer called the bar exam. They're giving this in February of 1979, and my graduation isn't until May. And I say, well, I might as well take the test. Nobody passes the first time. So I take the bar exam, and the results come out on the same day as my graduation. My whole family is flown up from Los Angeles. My brothers are all there. My mother is there. We're in this little box of an apartment that I have. I'm putting on my cap and gown. We're getting ready to go to the ceremony, and there's a pounding on the door. And my best friend from the law firm burst in, and he says, Ronald, they just posted the bar results. And guess what? You passed. And at age 24, I became one of the youngest black attorneys ever licensed to practice law in the state of California. And it always amuses me during my pitch when I get applause because, remember, I'm an alcoholic. You ain't going to be applauding for a while, okay, anymore. Because I learned that the worst thing you can serve this drunk is not adversity, it's success. Because the success of passing the bar around emboldened my ego so much that I thought I was impervious to anything. I thought that I was invincible, and I went on a 6-year run. I don't think you heard me. I went on a run for 6 years where I built and I tore down, where I acquired and I lost, where I worked for firms and I would always abandon a job before they could find out who I was. That woman I took to the prom, Patrice Rushen, hired me as a legal consultant to her management company. She was trying something new. She wanted to be an artist who managed her whole own career. And she hired me to help make that happen. I'm there, and instead of me hanging in there, making this thing work, I'm the alcoholic who can't show up. We go to concerts at Radio City Music Hall, the Houston Astrodome, on the Rick James Super Freak Tour. We were the opening act. We're doing all this traveling. You know where I was. Instead of me being with her, I'm backstage with the diehards. You know what we're doing. I abandoned that job after 2 years. She didn't fire me. I just disappeared. In 1984, we had the Olympics come to Los Angeles. And I was hired by the Olympic Committee as a personnel coordinator. They were going to give me free tickets to every event in the Olympics. I love the Olympics. Track and field, boxing was big at the time, gymnastics, everything in the Summer Olympics. I was going to be there. I embezzled $800 because of my disease. And I abandoned that job before the Olympics started. And I have yet to see one event live. I could give you story after story after story of the blessings that God had given me that I drank away. You see, alcohol is no respecter of intellect. Alcohol don't care if you graduated from law school or if you dropped out from high school. Alcohol does not care if you're a man or if you're a woman. Alcohol does not care if you're black or if you're white. Alcohol don't care if you grew up in Westwood or in Watts. Alcohol happens to be an equal opportunity ass kicker. If you suffer from the disease that I suffer from, that is first of all physical in nature, that something occurs in Ronald White's body that is indescribable to somebody who's never felt it. There is a craving that takes place that can only be satisfied with another. And unfortunately, once I get another, that one wants another. until all the money is gone, and then I find myself crawling like a commando on my mother's bedroom floor, trying to get to her purse as she slept. I need to let you know this. I love my mother more than life. My mother made sacrifices for me and my brothers that can never be. My mother, when she put my father out, she didn't want to be on welfare, so she started working as a domestic, cooking and cleaning for other people's families, watching their children so she could feed her children. She wasn't satisfied with doing that, so she went to night school while she did that to get her high school diploma. Taking care of 6 boys, making sure we were in church every Sunday, making sure we always did our homework. This woman then took two jobs to go to college at night, got her college degree, got hired by a company called Prudential Insurance Company, where they loved her so much they gave her a gold watch to celebrate her. I stole that watch. Do you think I hate my mother? This is an incredible disease. I am blessed to have 3 brothers in this fellowship with me. Imagine that household for my mother, because all of us descended like locusts back on her house because we could no longer afford to pay rent. So she's got these 6 grown animals, parasites. We almost killed my mother in 1985. My mother had a nervous breakdown. I learned this later because I was too busy in the disease for me to even know why Mama went to the hospital for a little while. Thank God that God does not make misery comfortable. On July the 13th of 1986, a guy gave me some bags of weed to sell for him. This is what the lawyer has been reduced to. Sitting on a curb, running bags of weed out to cars on his mother's block. I cannot imagine the shame and degradation my mother felt of this son she had just been so proud of 5 years before, and I am virtually prostituting myself to this youngster down the street from her house. So I'm running these bags out to these cars, and the guy takes a break, and I steal his money. And when he returns, he wants to know where it is. And I had a bright idea. I said, if I explain this to him in my mother's house, he won't do anything to me. I've become a coward. I'm hiding behind my mother. She had just gotten dropped off from church, dressed in some beautiful church clothes. So I take this wolf in my mother's house. And I'm explaining to him I don't have his money. I say, Kenny, I'm sorry. His name was Kenny. I'm sorry, Kenny, I'll get the money back. And Kenny's very reasonable. He says, Ronnie, why don't we just go outside and we can make payment terms? And I take a deep breath because I think, oh, yes, this wasn't the first time I was in a jackpot, y'all. So, I thought I'd talk my way out of it again. So Kenny steps out on the front porch, and I start to step out after him, looking back, making sure Mama was close enough for me to see. And as I stepped out of that house, Kenny must have hit me as hard as he possibly could. And as he hit me, I found myself flying across my mother's front yard like a superhero without a cape. And I land on the grass, and he proceeds to run over and starts to kick me in the head and stomping me, trying to kill me. As he's kicking me and stomping me, I felt as if I were removed from my body watching this happen. And I looked over and I saw Mama step out on the porch. And I expected her to say, stop, that's my baby. But Mama says nothing. And I look back at Kenny, and he's still kicking me and stomping me. And I look back at my mother, and my mother turned around, and she walked back in the house. and she closed the door. Now, my mother is not heartless. My mother is one of the best people that I know. My mother would sit with me. I was asthmatic as a child, had asthma real bad, and this was the days before they had inhalers and what have you. They would have to rush you to the hospital, and they would put me in a bed covered by a plastic tent, and they would pump oxygen into that tent. My mother would sit vigil bedside with me with her hand snaked up underneath that tent to hold my little hand so I would know I wasn't alone. See, that's my mother. And that's the woman who turned around and walked back in the house, and she closed the door. And I knew as clear as anything that whatever it was that I had done that had beaten the love and compassion out of that woman, I knew I was done. The next day I checked into a... Wait a minute, wait. You see, the liar wants to come out of me. I didn't check in anywhere. I was dropped off at the Salvation Army Harbor Light Center. I didn't have reservations. Mr. White? No, I didn't have luggage. I was dropped off by my oldest brother, Will. Dropped me off on the Nickel in Los Angeles. The Nickel is 5th Street, y'all. Skid Row. I never drank on Skid Row, but I had to go to Skid Row to get sober. They had a recovery home called the Salvation Army Harbor Light Center, housing 150 beds for alcoholic men. The greatest service that the Salvation Army Harbor Lights did for me was they allowed an H&I panel of Alcoholics Anonymous to come into that facility. If you don't know what H&I is, hospital and institutions. Those men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous that bring the message into treatment centers, into prisons, into hospitals. Those people brought the message of Alcoholics Anonymous into the Harbor Light Center, and they saved my life. Because when I listened to them sharing from podium, just like I'm sharing today, they shared their stories, and they didn't look like their stories. They shared about being hookers and hoes, players and pimps, boosters, absentee mothers, neglectful fathers. They talked about walking away from their jobs and now they were gainfully employed. They talked about being in the PTA now. They talked about bringing the message onto Skid Row, no payment for it, just to help. And it intrigued me. And I fell in love with the fellowship before I fell in love with the program. I started catching the vans that they had us sign up for meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I started catching a bus. Ralph came into that facility 88 days after I did, and we started trudging together. We started going to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous on the bus. We got a home group in the hood called 9604 South Figueroa. That we like to call it Figueroa, but I need to let you know that club saved my life. I went to all the dances. I went to all the picnics. I went to all the conventions. I had the nerve when I had about 10 or 15 years of sobriety to walk around and say, that's not alcohol. That's not the program Alcoholics Anonymous. The dances, those dances won't keep. I needed to know that you could have fun sober. I needed to know, man, that there were men and women that could smile again. They had their families with them. They had their children with them. And it gave me hope. After I'd been sober about a year and a half, somebody heard me speaking at a meeting, and they walked up to me and they said, well, I forgot to tell you guys, when I got sober, I thought I could never be a lawyer again because I'd been practicing law illegally for a couple of years, never paid my bar dues. I know I'm a lawyer. Why do I have to pay dues, right? And so I've been practicing law illegally. And I thought when I got sober that dream was gone. Somebody approached me at the end of a meeting once and they says, Ronald, why don't you call the state bar and find out what's happening with your bar card? Living in fear in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. They said, action. I called the state bar. They said, Mr. White, you haven't been disbarred, but you've been suspended for non-payment of dues, $2,500. $2,500 sounded like $25,000 because I had a minimum wage job. But it's amazing how much money you can save when you're not drinking. I saved half of every paycheck for the next 6 months, and I wrote a check for $2,500 to the State Bar of California, and they gave me my bar card back. A couple of months later, somebody said, isn't it time for you to look for a job, Ronald, as a lawyer? Still living in fear, afraid of sending out their resume. You know where you got that gap on it? I got this 2-year gap. Harbor Light, the Sober Living, Harmony Hall. I was a bookkeeper for... What law firm is going to want to hire me? They said, Ronald, just trust in God and apply. First job I applied for was with the Los Angeles County Public Defender's Office. They were doing interviews, and I sent in a resume, and they scheduled me for an interview. And I'm sitting around at the interview, and these 5 lawyers are asking me hypothetical questions and this, that, and that. And nobody had asked me about the resume. And I'm thinking, yeah, I got... And this smart-ass lawyer at the end of the table says, Mr. White, we've been looking at your resume, and we noticed you haven't been practicing for the last 2 years. Why not? I said, sir, I'm an alcoholic. I did not intend to tell them that. Y'all got me trained, though. I'm Ronald White. I'm an alcoholic, right? You know, it just comes out, right? You know, I said, sir, I'm an alcoholic, right? He says, well, Mr. White, lawyers do a lot of drinking. Don't you think the stresses of this position might make you want to drink again? I said, sir, it was stressful when I was out there. I said, I think God has prepared me to do this job. And they said, God? Who is that? Is that a reference? Right? I don't think they hear God in job interviews a lot, right? You know. He said, okay, Mr. White, we'll contact you and let you know if you're on the waiting list or if we can hire you. When I caught the bus home that day, it was a Wednesday, I wasn't too confident because of that alcohol thing, right? But when I got home, they called me 2 hours later and said, we want you in for another interview this Friday, Mr. White. I said, shoot, probably want me to pee in a bottle. You know, but I'm sober 2 years. I'm willing. When I showed up that Friday, they didn't ask me to pee in a bottle. They had me see the head public defender of all Los Angeles County, a guy named Wilbur Littlefield. Mr. Littlefield had me sit on a chair in his office, and he started walking around talking about what public defenders do. And I'm sitting on that chair fidgeting like a witness in Perry Mason. And I'm waiting for the questions, right? But I've been in a meeting the night before. They put me in a prayer circle. They prayed for me. I'm ready. Mr. Littlefield stopped talking, and he didn't ask me any questions. He just gave me this funny look. And he walked over to the chair where I sat. And he held his hand out to me. And he said, Ron, we'd be proud to have you join our office. Didn't he know just 2 years before I was stealing the food out my mother's refrigerator? Sleeping on her floor. What is that but a miracle? Alcoholics Anonymous takes the broken up pieces of men and women, and with the guidance of a loving God who works through the unselfish men and women who toil in this fellowship, we put the pieces back together again. It was as if each man and woman who is in this room today were standing in the lobby of the Harbor Light Center when I arrived there more dead than alive with my chin on my chest, too ashamed to even look you in the face, and you guys walked up to me and you placed your hand underneath my chin and you lifted up my head. And even more than that, you wrapped your arms around me. As dirty and as filthy and as nasty as I was, you wrapped your arms around me and you literally loved me back to life. See, that's Alcoholics Anonymous. After I joined the public defender's office, I was there a few months and they transferred me to one of their branches called traffic court. When I walked into that office, I looked over at this filing cabinet and there was a secretary there filing paper, and she had a leather mini skirt on and some pumps and a nice little jerry curl. I said to myself, I must have her. Right? And we started this torrid office romance, and she got pregnant, and I asked her to marry me, and it didn't move real fast, and I wasn't quite sure that it was going to last given those circumstances. This past May, that beautiful woman who sits in that front row right now and I celebrated 34 years of marriage. She gave me a son, Ronald Jr. She had a daughter who was 6 years old at the time that we met, named Terrence. Some of you know what it means to come into the life of somebody, and it's almost like they feel like you're competing for their mom or their dad or whoever it is, and it's real tough. But I never called her my stepdaughter. I simply put the steps into our relationship. And when she graduated from high school, she introduced me to all of her friends as her dad. That may not mean anything to anybody in this room, but it meant everything to me. She has given us 4 amazing grandchildren who call me Papa. Now, I don't know if I made a list of all the things I wanted when I got in Alcoholics Anonymous, a wish list, Papa never would have made the list. See, I can't dream enough, big enough for Alcoholics Anonymous. I had some Perry Mason moments in court. I was invited to go to the White House in Washington, D.C. because of the work I was doing in my community as a public defender. This congresswoman invited me to be part of a delegation, and I'm standing on the lawn of the White House being interviewed, and all I could think about was being kicked on the lawn by Kenny. How do you get from there to there? Alcoholics Anonymous. My family has been reunited as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. My mother is now 95 years old and still kicking. Wow. But everything is not all pink clouds and puppy dogs in Alcoholics Anonymous. We have adversity inside the room. 10 years ago, I found myself sitting in the parking lot of my law office. I had left the public defender's office in 2000 and started my own law office, sole practitioner. I'm sitting in the parking lot of the law office reading a letter from the State Bar of California telling me of their intent to disbar me because of my representation of a client who had embezzled $1 million from some of his investors. And I was supposed to have oversight of his practice, of his activities, and I didn't watch him. I trusted him, and I got lazy, and I didn't do my job. And I'm sitting here at 60 years of age reading a letter, 28 years sober, thinking that my life is ending. And I can't tell you the fear that gripped me inside that car. I've been going through this whole process of fighting the State Bar about this, to show them, well, I didn't know, and this, that, and the other, and hadn't told my sponsor, hadn't told my wife, hadn't told anybody about this, thinking I'm going to handle it. I need to let you know something about pride and ego. The very things that we come in Alcoholics Anonymous to face and be rid of. Stay sober a while and let people start patting you on the back. Start speaking a couple of places. Start having people tell you what a great guy you are and you're doing all this, that, and the other. You know what returns? Pride and ego. And it's choking me. And it's about to kill me. When Juanita asked me what was something from the book that I might want to have read or put in there about me, I selected something from Bill's story. Bill Wilson was in the hospital and his friend Ebby had visited him. And one of the things Ebby said was, particularly was it imperative that I work with others as he had worked with me. He said, because faith without works is dead. And how true this is for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. And if he did not work, he would drink. And if he drank, he would die. And then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. And I cannot tell you which person it was that had given me a hug over the years, which person it was I listened to a fifth step. I don't know which meeting it was I might have brewed some coffee for. I don't know which spiritual thing I put in the box that got me through that dark place, that got me home that day, because all I could think about was killing myself. And it is only by His grace that I stand before you today. When I made it home, my wife saw how broken I was. She didn't know what, and when I told her what had happened, instead of her saying, "You stupid, how could you?" she embraced me and she said, "Honey, we're going to be okay." When I told my mother, and I've made my mother cry, as she had not cried for 28 years over me, my mother said, "Son, I don't know what you're going to do, but I know God's got you." None of my sponsees left me. We lost everything. We lost our home, every material good. When they evicted us from that home, my sponsees showed up with cars and trucks, and they moved us to a rental property, and they bought food for us and sat in the backyard with us so that we wouldn't feel ashamed and alone. That's Alcoholics Anonymous. My wife had to go back to work after having not worked for 25 years to provide for our family. There were times that her pay would not cover the rent that we had, and we were looking at getting evicted from that. And the men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous and my family members stepped up and they paid our rent for us. I was unemployed for 2 years. During that entire 2 years, I never stopped coming to meetings. And I cannot tell you how embarrassed and ashamed I felt. And I thought everybody was talking about me. Look at his spiritual ass. See, I told you, right? But I have trained feet. And I kept showing up. After those 2 years where I got a job around the corner from that recovery home I got sober in Skid Row, working for a company that were picking up alcoholic men and women off the streets of Skid Row to try to help them get sober. I found myself standing in showers with naked men. It's not what it sounds like, y'all. Standing in showers with men who could not wash themselves, washing their back, giving them lice treatments. I got paid $18 an hour for that job, and I can't tell you how I felt after being unemployed for 2 years, and I was being useful again. And that 18, I felt better than any paycheck I'd ever got as a lawyer. And that job led to another job. And that job led to another job. And I work in treatment. And I work for people who are mentally incompetent to stand trial. I work in facilities leading men and women today, giving back, something much more useful than I had been doing before. I'm going to leave you guys with this story. 3 days after I wanted to commit suicide, my brother Ralph and I were scheduled to do a workshop at the Music City Roundup in Nashville, Tennessee. And see, my life hasn't turned around yet. This is 3 days after I want to kill myself. I can't even see light, and I don't want to go. But I told you I have trained feet, and I honor my commitments, and I get on that plane. And Ralph and I are sitting at breakfast with 2 sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they let me use their name for this story because it means so much to me. Kent Coleman and Steve Lee. They're like brothers to me. And me and Ralph are having breakfast with them, and I'm crying, I'm sobbing about what has happened to me. And I'm telling them I'm so sorry that I've let Alcoholics Anonymous down. And you guys have done so much for me, and I've disappointed the fellowship. And I'm crying, and they try to share with me things that had happened in their lives. One of them talked about financial problems. One of them talked about marital problems. But you know, our stuff always said, "Yeah, but you don't understand." right? You know, and they trying to pick me up, and I finally cry out. I said, who would ever want me to speak again at a meeting? I said, me getting my license back, being a lawyer, was the best thing in my story. And one of them looked at me, I think it was Kent, one of them looked at me, and I'm going to clean up the language, y'all. They said, Ronnie, are you crazy? Don't you know in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more you screw up your life, the more we want to hear your story? And they said, not because you screwed up. What we want to know is, how did you not drink through that?
Right, right, that's right.
And I'm here to share with you this afternoon that it is only by His grace. It is only by the grace of a loving, merciful, and forgiving God that I'm able to stand before you. It is only because of the men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous who have propped me up, who have supported me, who have fed me, who have loved me, that I'm able to stand before this podium. And it is such an honor and a privilege. I cannot tell you how much I love you in this fellowship. Thank you so much for my life.